You know, dating and friendships have been a popular topic over the past few years on YouTube and also on social media. And, I think everyone can acknowledge for the most part that they have been declining, that people have been having a worse social life over the past few years. And naturally they complain about how this is impacting their lives. Some people cope, but the more honest ones say that this has been negatively affecting their lives because we are social creatures. And these videos they point to the lack of usage of social spaces, such as hobbies, third spaces, or social events, as the reason why people and their social lives have been suffering over the past few years. You know, some people say that there has been a lack of third spaces. Some people don't avail of them, so they don't try. I think that's a bit bullshit right there because people do try. We are social creatures. We would try to at least make an effort, contrary to what some people like to say that we just like to be lazy and sit inside our rooms all day, all night, and stare at our screens. And other people say that they've been becoming expensive, which is also bullshit. But yeah, like £5 for a pint or $7 for like a beer every now and then is not expensive. So off the bat, it's already a bullshit claim that people not like to make. And some people say that people don't bother attending them, which makes it, of course, harder for everyone to be more social. And this is true, but ironically, it's because, probably those people that don't attend, they have attended in the past, but it just wasn't the expected social experience that they had in mind. So that's why they don't bother attending it. And you may think that these so-called social spaces are conducive to socializing and forming and maintaining social connections, but they're actually not for various reasons, which I'll go over later. And since I'm saying that these social settings are ineffective, naturally I would have in mind different aspects of a social setting that I would consider to be impactful to the effectiveness of these connections being formed and maintained. And and I'll also go over how a recent social setting amongst young adults, which for some reason people are unwilling to say or don't even consider because it's been missing for so many years now, is, in my opinion, causing a major part of this social decline. And that social setting, drum roll, is the office. Yep, I said it, the workplace. And just before I proceed, I know you may have some natural assumptions to make about how I would propose the ideal way of people regaining their social health, at least so, young adults. But yeah, before I want to go on, I just want to state some caveats of how I would implement it if I was in a position of government. So essentially, it wouldn't be 5 days a week at the office. I think that's a bit much. I think we've experienced both sides of the coin, and yeah, 5 days a week at the office is a bit of a dread. Waking up early, depending on how far you live from the office. Um, commuting, the costs involved, going back and forth. And even then, from a social standpoint, seeing your colleagues 5 days a week is a bit much. Um, and conversely, just staying indoors for 5 days a week, also 8 hours a day, um, is probably not going to lead to you socializing or at least interacting with people your own age, which I would say is a good and natural group of people to form connections with. And of course, I'm not saying that you shouldn't be friends with people of other demographics or other age groups. But yeah, it's just more natural that your friends are naturally going to be your own age, right? That same stage of life. With all that said, I think a good balance would be 2 days a week at the office. So 3 days a week at home is still decent. And yeah, for a reason that'll be obvious later. It's just that it was just a nice medium of, seeing people, socializing, practicing those social skills, getting that social need fulfilled, but also, having 3 days to just rest and just chill. So it's a nice balance there. So now I'll be going over the different elements that make a social setting effective or not. So the first one that I'll talk about, which is an element of social setting, or rather a characteristic of humans, is the opportunity for repeated physical exposure or repeated proximity. So, we are social creatures. We rely on familiarity to be comfortable with other people. And it's not surprising to think that if there is a space where we regularly interact with each other, even if it's light interaction or just seeing each other, not even talking, or being in proximity with each other, that we feel more at ease with seeing those types of people more and more. And thus, we have an easier time socializing with them. And yeah, there's an inherent low pressure to them as there is, no need to socialize, right? It's regular, it's low pressure, it's constant, and it's optional, right? So in the workplace or even in class in uni, as an example, as to this type of social setting, conversations are optional to join in or to start, right? So, there's this low pressure. If you feel like a conversation is interesting nearby, you can join in. Or if it's not, you can just keep to what you're doing. So there's kind of that low pressure situation over there. And yeah, what's more to this is that the environment itself is not dedicated as a primary function to socializing. It's dedicated to something else. So that's why it kind of goes against the point of socializing, which is like socializing is done spontaneously, or maybe at the end of a day, once some other activity was done. But that's also kind of why these social events are kind of counterintuitive, because if you go to an event with the intention of socializing with people that you don't know, this is different from people that you do know, right? From like work or from uni or school, then the dynamic changes, and I would say for the worse, obviously. There's a primary focus to this type of social setting, which is working or studying. So yeah, it's spontaneous. And if we look at how humans have spent, their lives in the vast majority of humankind, it has been in these small tribes of like 150 people in which we regularly cross paths. We had these sort of common spaces and times of the day where we would just, meet, maybe have a little chit chat here and there. Um, and yeah, I think based on a few videos that I watched, most of the workers who were in agriculture, uh, you know, working on getting food, and they would have sometimes these breaks in which they would just spend time together, not do anything, maybe just talk about work, even though there wasn't much to talk about. But anyways, the point is that they would just spend a decent amount of time together, and they could just chillax and have a low pressure environment. And yeah, it makes sense that our biological and behavioral circuitry follows what has been the case in our environment for the vast majority of our lifespan on this earth as a species. So, with that explanation, with that explanation, it makes sense why social events such as a meetup event or going to a bar isn't conducive to forming social connections with people. And I'm not saying, of course, that it can't be done, right? Of course, you can hear stories of people making friends and actually staying friends with them after meeting them at the bar, or even hooking up or even forming a relationship. But those are not the norm, in my opinion. I have attended a decent amount of these events, and it just feels like whenever you go to these events, it feels a bit forced, right? Because again, you're like looking and looking at other people and trying to force these interactions like you're interested in them. Like that's the point. You don't know anything about them, right? It's just the point of like these school or uni or work environments is that there's kind of like this context for you to work upon, right? There's this kind of shared goal, shared activity that you can kind of start a conversation from and get an idea, get a feel of how the other person reacts to the current setting, reacts to the current activity taking place, the current work or current like class activity. So you kind of get a feel for them, right? So you kind of see like if you actually like being around them or not. Um, and because yeah, that's the point of socializing, in a kind of sense. It's just seeing how they handle life, right? Not the actual act of socializing. So yeah, it's feels a bit forced. It feels a bit enthusiastic. Like why would people just be interested in each other just for the sake of being people, right? Like sure, you went to an event, but again, if you actually go to these, like you don't actually feel like, oh, I'm so interested in this other person, let me talk to them. And obviously, when you go to these events, you try and do it, but it just doesn't feel the same as if you were like in a regular low pressure environment, such as the workplace or university. And by the way, university, as a little side note, also, I have noticed online through stats that university, even after these post-COVID years still implement to some extent, I think like 20% or so, either hybrid or fully distance learning. So I think that also contributes to the social decline of young adults. So those that are still in education. So yeah, it's not a surprise that overall that people are experiencing a worse social health. And these kind of settings are just not effective. There's just this kind of this fake enthusiasm to want to keep socializing, and again, it's forced, right? You can't just stop socializing and just stand around. Like it feels awkward. You have to keep going. So that kind of exacerbates like that kind of low pressure requirements to more effectively form social connections because that's what it is. It's just like being genuinely interested in people based on the conversation or based on maybe what they're doing or how they look even. So it kind of goes against that you're forcing stuff. And yeah, I mean, I'm not. I just wanted to put a disclaimer, if not obvious already, I'm not putting down anyone who goes to these social events or anyone that I've met in these social events. I'm sure they're great people, but the way that we try to form these social connections at these events is just a bit off. That's all. Yeah, another element that can be taken, that can be shown through an example, which is like, taking sports or exercise-based classes as an example, is that you do not have time pretty much at any point of the activity to properly, just drift away and socialize. It's, you know, quite consistent with the activity. You just focus on the activity itself. And it might sound contradictory to what I just said in that, a good social setting focuses primarily on another activity, but also those kinds of settings of sport-based activities or classes, um, they just have you focus really quite a bit on the activity itself. So it's yeah, there's barely any pockets to, properly, engage in conversation with someone. So it kind of breaks that kind of momentum that you might have had with a person if you had more time to just socialize and keep talking. But yeah, it's just not conducive to it. And yeah, you're going to be in those kinds of classes. You're going to be tired. You're going to be panting. You're going to be recovering. So you're going to be less inclined to talk with others. And yeah, even before or after, it feels like people are in a rush in these sorts of classes. Like you barely have time to talk to them before or after. since it feels like generally people have a busy lifestyle, um, for better or for worse. And yeah, it feels like people afterwards they want to just get back home to shower, eat, and sleep, or just go to another class or work out. Another disadvantage of certain classes is that there can be an age or gender skew. So, unfortunately, sometimes a hobby just attracts people that aren't in your age group. So, it's going to be naturally harder to form a connection because you're just not on the same vibe, right? You're not on the same wavelength of life, not at the near stage of life that you're at, progression-wise, career-wise. So there's just a different energy over there. There's a different sense of humor, probably. There's a different culture or music that you like. So yeah, there's just generally a different kind of energy that's acting uh, as this kind of subtext to how well you can probably connect to other people. And yeah, also it's this skew also applies to the gender aspect. So some classes just naturally, attract one gender over the other. And yeah, like for example, combat classes such as MMA or Muay Thai, they primarily attract guys. Or other classes like Pilates or maybe even not even art classes, they definitely just skew towards women, right? So you can try and give the advice like, hey, it doesn't matter if you don't like an activity, you can go there just to socialize, but that kind of people can kind of sense if you don't like an activity and you don't enjoy it, and that kind of affects the socialization part. You're forcing it, right? So these kinds of activities are unfortunately aren't that conducive because they naturally won't attract people from both genders that are equally as interested into them. So that's just one reason. Yeah, there are co-ed classes, but sometimes they're just not that great. Um, okay, again, they can be mostly guys there or mostly women there. And again, if you're not interested into that particular class or activity, it kind of shows. And yeah, um, within the office, you know, since young people like to get into office jobs, white collar jobs, so finance, tech, that kind of thing, then obviously they would if you work at the office, there's a good chance that there'll be enough people your own age and maybe enough direct or indirect dating opportunities there. And I'm going to get to, shortly about why dating in the workplace is not necessarily a terrible thing to do as long as you do it sensibly. So because, these comments sometimes saying like, oh, it's terrible, things went wrong, they don't really delve into details as to why that is. So I'll be elaborating on how that can be done sensibly. And yeah, next thing is um, another disadvantage of these social settings is just that they're optional, right? By nature, they don't have to be consistent. So people can just not attend a session or two or even more for various reasons, like, they have chores or matters to attend to, they're out of town, they just don't like it as well, and they even just stop attending altogether. Or maybe they're just lazy and they don't even attend the session enough times. And, with the office, it is a requirement that you have to go to, so there's kind of that consistent nature that you can rely upon. Back then, like people didn't realize that it was a consistent element. But yeah, now that a few years have passed since COVID and people have gone through these classes, I'm pretty sure a good amount of people can attest to how um, inconsistent some other people can attend, and can be quite frustrating to build a sense of community and sense of connection in that manner.
Everybody wants third spaces until a homeless guy shows up. Now, there's a lot of talk about third spaces for a reason. We need places to form community beyond just home and work. But that begs the question of who gets to be a part of our communities. You want more parks, more libraries?
So yeah, now on to third spaces. So examples of those would be pubs, bars, parks. Some people mention parks, but that doesn't really make sense. I haven't heard of people just going to parks and just chilling in the fucking sun, just for the potential of forming a connection and having someone just come up to them saying hi, or them coming up to someone in the park and say hi. That it's just weird. Like some people just like to cope and just make up bullshit scenarios in their mind just to propagate a narrative that third spaces are the way to go, when really they're just bullshitting. Like they probably either haven't done it, or they have done it and are lying about it, or again, probably an exception, but not the rule, is that they have met someone as a friend or as a partner. So it's just bullshit all around. And yeah, so that's parks. Another one is like libraries. Again, people point to libraries as, I don't know why people would choose libraries as a social space. It's literally meant to be quiet. So I'm not quite sure what people are thinking. Like people are just making up bullshit. Like if you go to a library, you're probably going to get given weird stares and weird looks if you try to start a conversation up. And yeah, I think people just like to make up bullshit. I swear, they just like to like. There's kind of like this kind of phenomenon. Um, I don't know what to call it, but essentially there's kind of like this initial suspicion of what may be a good idea, in this case, third spaces, and then other people will like to, especially content creators, like to feed upon that and just exaggerate the effectiveness of that. And then we have all these fucking videos about people saying, hey, these third spaces, libraries, parks, they're just so underused, we have to return to, like, they're just making up bullshit. Like if anyone has proper experience, they know that they're just not effective. So that's why these kind of videos just piss me off, because they're just disingenuous or maybe just hella naive. Um, and yeah, back to the topic at hand. Like if we go to the more, I guess, realistic ones like pubs and bars, like if you go alone, it's kind of weird, dude. Like people usually have their drinks, they're into their own groups. And if you go up to some people and just say, hey, what's up? They just look at you weird, like, no, that's not how it's done. Um, like, of course, there are those moments where people get really crazy and maybe you just, spill into other groups, groups spill into other groups, but most of the time it's not. And that's more of like parties or not. And even then, you go to parties with your own friends, and that kind of helps create this more social space, because people like interacting with people, with groups, and not not solo people, because there's already that kind of shared connection there. These pubs and bars are just not effective. You just get looked at weird. You probably try once or twice, and then you don't try again, because it just feels weird. And also, you have like probably have a negative experience, negative feedback from other people if you do try and do that shit. Some people are chill, but some people will just straight up tell you like, "What the fuck are you doing?" Because that isn't natural. Yeah, essentially the point is like the proper way to go to these third spaces um, is with friends, and typically these third spaces would be in downtown where most of the offices are located. So with that said, that kind of intertwines with what I'm saying, which is like working from home has kind of removed this social time and setting after work, where people, young adults, like to go around with their friends that they made from the workplace, which is possible. I know that some people like to deny that it is possible, but young people, people in general are not that unique, so it's easy to relate to one another, especially if you work at the same company and same office, so you have stuff to talk about. And yeah, the thing is like you go to these places with friends, and where do you usually make friends as an adult? Ironically, and this may take some convincing to do, and I'll elaborate that further in this video, it is through the workplace. Um, because yeah, it's a regular social setting where you can interact with people your own age. And yeah, these other social spaces are just not effective. In this current era, the removal of the workplace, which was done since COVID, has been quite detrimental to young people. It's quite coincidental, right, that since COVID, the social decline of young adults has been observed quite starkly. And people just like to just blame technology, but that, social media has been in place since like the early 2010s. And if you look at different social markers like then, even like videos as a proxy to how significant the problem was back then, it wasn't really that significant. Like if we look at a graph, like let's just say over here, and here is like a type of social metric, which is sexlessness amongst young adults between early 20s and early 30s. You'll see that, when social media was in play from around 2010 to 2014, which is when it was really popping, right? Facebook was invented in 24, YouTube in 2004, and YouTube in 2005, and Instagram in 2010. Those are kind of the big three social media platforms early on and still to this day. Using 2010 as the year of the last behemoth entering into the fray, we had a few years for people to get adopted into it, and especially young adults, young people are the easiest ones to adopt to technology. So you wouldn't expect there to be such a long period for them to incur the negative effects of social media. But yeah, guess what? Using this graph as an example, you'll see that, from 2010 to 2014, the rates weren't really going up. And in some lines, it was going down. And it wasn't really until COVID, which if you look at the 2018 to 2022 um, periods, you'll see that, yeah, the sexlessness rates skyrocketed. Like, why is that? Yes, there was the implementation of um, COVID. Yeah, there's of course the working from home, and of course there were other general restrictions put into place, such as you can't socialize, um, in gatherings in bigger than X number. But essentially, people were stopping in seeing each other, so that kind of plays a big part into it. And guess what? Even after these restrictions were lifted, people are still complaining about it. People are still having negative effects from it. People are still making videos about it. So it's not so much the restrictions, but it's more so an indication that the social setting that was undervalued by others, that was not even seen as a social setting by some people, is having ramifications on its lack of existence right now. And yeah, it's just points to the fact that social media is not the end all be all. It does play a role, but it doesn't explain everything. And even then, you can't really enact a social media ban for adults. I know that was done for young kids in the UK recently, but it'll be a whole different ballgame if it was also done to adults. It would have different problems. One of them, of course, would be the restriction of information. So that would definitely be a dangerous approach to even consider. But yeah, one thing that can be reinstated from a government side, which I haven't really seen any government around the world do it. They have done other changes which have been ineffective. Like Japan, I think, offering monetary incentives to couples who have more kids. But that's the thing, that's only affecting couples. The ones who are trying to get into couples aren't having a worse time doing so. So that's like an example of why the government doesn't know what was actually causing the problem. So yeah, if I was in a position of government, I would honestly just enforce um, pretty much every company. Of course, there's always some exceptions here and there in every decision making out there in life, but essentially, as a general, it should be that every company should have a 2 day a week at the office hybrid policy. It's very simple. They would just have to coordinate on which days they want to go into, but it's pretty simple. And yeah, they would just have to make sure that the right people are the ones who are required to go in. So people who have, I mentioned this earlier in the video, but people who have essentially kids, wives, or husbands, so essentially they have a family at home. They have already have a social life, which ironically may have been built up by the workplace in some shape or manner. They obviously don't have to attend. They can attend to, of course, they're not excluded. And if a person has a disability or they live too far away from the city, then obviously they're also exempt. So reasonable exemptions can be made, but of course the main goal there is to get people in their 20s, in their 30s, into the workplace so that they can form these social connections that were so-called subtle before. And yeah, it's just weird. Like it's such like what happened during COVID was a major event, was working from home, the proliferation of it. But now that people are complaining about it, they just point to different avenues which themselves they were available even before COVID, but they're just not going to point to working from home as a major culprit behind the current social decline. It's just so frustrating. So yeah, that's how I would approach it. Um, Hopefully you understood the perspective behind it, the reasonings, and the mechanisms that I outlined behind what make a social setting more effective than the other. And yeah, hopefully we can just stop being so vicious and contrarian in an almost knee-jerk reaction to whenever someone says that working from home may not be the best thing ever, especially from a social perspective. Now I'll be talking about a common concern that is had across the workplace, which is dating at the workplace. So firstly, even setting aside dating, there's the friendship aspect of going to the office as a young adult. So already from the get-go, that is a good thing. And yeah, now that we go on to dating, essentially, there are different ways that you can date, but of course, you can do it sensibly. Like whenever people make these sorts of cautionary claims of, hey, don't do it, no matter what, don't do it. If you value your career, don't do it. Like they never go into the details like, were you dating someone that you regularly interacted with? If so, you probably made a bad decision because if things go south, guess what? You have to constantly face that person and it's awkward and it's hard to deal with and navigate. Or, even then, like when it just comes to breaking up with someone, regardless of how regularly you interact with them, as long as you do it in a mature manner, as long as you're both mature about it, then you can be cool about it. And not every breakup has to end up in a goddamn train wreck. People can be mature, right? People can have different circumstances. People have agency on how they, deal with other people. And of course, I can't predict all the different scenarios and just say, yeah, for sure, if people are mature about it, it's always going to end up in a good breakup. Like they can also be bad breakups, sure, I can acknowledge that. But there are always risks in every approach of life. So whether we're talking about, um, you know, dating someone from work or not, or some other place, or dating, or even another decision like should young people work at home or work more in the office? There are always pros and cons. There are always risks, right? And we have to just be honest about, you know, that we have to be honest in the fact that good things, most great things in life come at a risk. You have to be willing to go through that. If you don't do that, then most great things in life, most relationships, most businesses, most achievements, they wouldn't have happened because there's generally a sense of risk. Not a sense of risk. There is risk in most things that we value, and that's fine. It's not the end world if something goes wrong. You can even go past that. If you're a strong person, if you're a mature person, you can get past that. All right. Don't just throw a hissy fit if things don't go right. That's life. You're not owed perfect circumstances. That's that's kind of the tragic beauty of humans. We're not owed the perfect life, but we can make the best out of it. And so yeah, that's one aspect of dating in the workplace, and that is the direct way of dating. And another one is indirect dating. So essentially, if you're friends with someone and you know, they might not like you, but they think you're a good match for someone that they know outside the workplace, then guess what? They can set you up, right? That's indirect dating. So I think it was discounted how significant the workplace was in providing relationships, especially in this globalized era, in the past past 50 years or so, which people regularly migrate after university, so they leave their communities back at home, so they have less and less friends and families to set them up. So yeah, we just have to recognize the value of the workplace for setting up people. Um, if you read online, there are cases where people have bad breakups or just even breakups. And I will admit that it has affected their career, but maybe again, they did it in a stupid manner. But there are also cases, if you read online, that people have happily met their spouses in the workplace or have been set up. And you don't really hear those cases much because we humans, A, like to remember the negative experiences more because we are kind of a risk-averse species. And B, those kinds of negative stories get, uh, you know, how do I say this? The vocal minority are vocal, right? The ones who are happy don't usually just post it online because they usually have their own lives and they don't spend it usually online, unlike us weirdos. And yeah, there are people who can vouch for the effectiveness of dating at the workplace, right? You just have to be sensible about things and you have to be accepting of things not going your way. That's life. Um, and it's weird because people can view dating as a risky proposition, particularly in the workplace. But when it comes to other avenues of their life, like, oh, moving to a new city, or maybe taking a mortgage in these kind of uncertain times with AI, or studying at a course and hopefully get a return from it financially. Like people like to take risks in all these different aspects of their lives, but when it comes to dating, they're just so averse to that. It's just weird, man. It's just weird.